Well, good afternoon again. It is so great to be with you. Again, I'm your host, Pastor Cynthia West. I am so grateful. Today, our discussion, altered reality. We have some great doctors that have come to be with us to help us to understand exactly what we're going through even greater. And so we're so excited to get to them. But before we do, let's first speak on the King's Pantry. The King's Pantry is that nonprofit organization that's located on 30 Florence Street. If you need any assistance in food, however we can help you, we're asking you to please allow us the privilege and the opportunity to serve you. The King's Pantry located 30 Florence Street. The hours are from 10 to 1:30, Monday through Friday. You're going to have to bring an ID. But you know that if you come to the King's Pantry, we have endeavored to give you fresh food, fresh vegetables, and fresh fruit, and all that we can do, and fresh bread. We are so excited to be able to help you during these times. This organization is over 30 years. We feed every Sunday, and we have an emergency pantry during the week. Never once have we missed, but during the blizzard. Won't you please consider donating to us so that we can even reach more people in different lands? We are so grateful to you in advance. Think about that non-taxable donation. Well, thank you for joining us. Conversation time. This is exciting. Altered reality is what we're going to be speaking about. We're going to ask you that if you have any questions for the doctors, if you would be so kind as to place it in the comment box, and we will ask them for you. I know that you're probably just as excited as we are to hear from these professionals, and they're such a vast group that can cover every area, and I am excited to introduce our first doctor is Dr. Edwin C. King, professor of psychology and sociology, coordinator of Human Service Program, Housatonic Community College. Dr. King, how are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. It is so great to have you. We are excited for you to explain some of this altered reality we're dealing with.
Okay,
So we're looking forward. Doctor, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a faculty member at Housatonic Community College. I've been there since the founding of the college. I've been there, this is my 51st year at the college. So I've seen a lot of things over the years, a lot of things. And I got to say that this is one of the most unusual years since March. It's been extremely unusual. So anyway, I love this work. I'm a professor of psychology and sociology and coordinator of the Human Services Program at the college. Basically, that's my academic background. I also work with communities and I work with organizations around the whole area of stress, stress management, wellness, those kinds of things. Kind of practical community work.
Thank you so much. Our next doctor that we're going to be introducing, Dr. Jeffrey W. White, PhD, Executive Director, Senior Staff Therapist, Professional Credentials, Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist in Connecticut. Dr. White, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, doctor, thank you for accepting. We are so graciously humbled.
Oh, thank you.
Doctor, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the director for a counseling center in Fairfield called Renew Counseling Services. We also have offices in West Hartford and also in New York City. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and have been practicing for almost 25 years now. I particularly specialize in couples therapy. So that's going to be probably the area that I can add the most perspective on is just related to couples and certainly how they've been impacted by the pandemic.
Yes. Yes, we're looking forward to that conversation. Our next doctor, Dr. Rochelle J. Brom Bevel. She's an associate professor and chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Fairfield University. Dr. Bevel, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Dr. Bevel, would you please give us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. First, thank you for having me. I have been at Fairfield University for about 7 years. And as you mentioned, I'm now the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I also serve on a number of other committees at Fairfield with regard to interdisciplinary studies, so Black studies and women, gender, and sexuality studies as well. And most recently, I am the faculty chair for inclusive excellence at Fairfield. So when it comes to issues related to race, class, gender, religion, I am very much interested and looking forward to the ways that we can think about how we can be most inclusive as we think about how to deal with this pandemic together.
Thank you. We're looking forward to this conversation. Dr. David Hollingsworth, clinical psychologist. Doctor, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you doing?
I am doing so well. It is such an honor to have you, doctor.
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here.
Would you just give us a little bit about yourself before we start our conversation?
Yes, of course. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I currently live in Alabama. So it's still morning time here. We haven't quite hit noon yet. However, I see some familiar faces. So I used to work in Connecticut. I was a professor at Fairfield University for 2.5 years, and I decided to move back south to be closer to my family. So primarily, I treat adults, usually depression, anxiety, PTSD, anger management. And then research-wise, I'm trained as a suicide researcher. So most of my research has been on suicide in African Americans and other ethnic minority groups.
Topics, yes. I'm so excited because everyone has a little bit of what we want to talk about this afternoon. Well, let's start. First of all, you're on the hot seat, and I guess you guys know that by now because people are so anxious to know professionally what's going on in their lives in this altered reality. In the midst of these unprecedented times, wearing masks to leave your home, restaurants that only allow a certain amount of people, kindergarteners with masks on, going to school, churches closed. Grocery stores are telling us if we can or cannot enter, and when you do, follow the dotted line. Some stores will not accept cash anymore. All that we know, or thought we knew, or had a handle on, seems to have disappeared. Where is the average person now mentally? Any of you?
I can jump in on that one if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, a little echo. I would like to focus on depression. I think depression is a major issue with the COVID-19 situation. We've always had depression. It's a very common diagnosis in our field, depression and anxiety. But I think with COVID, there are a few things I've made some notes about that make it even more of a concerning problem. And the folks that are watching can see if they fit some of these things, and then maybe later we could talk about some solutions or strategies they can use. One that jumps right out at me, and probably you, is that watch those horrible videos on TV back in March and April and May, where loved ones could not get to visit or many times even see their relatives. And I think that's been another very, very serious layer on depression. So we need to be cognizant of that. And in fact, to make it even worse, they can't bring comfort to others. You probably remember the pictures where a family member's up against a glass and talking with a relative, holding their hands at the glass. And they can't be with the person while they're, very seriously ill. And many instances, they're actually dying. So there's a real grief that's layered on top of this that makes it even more difficult. The other thing is social distancing. I think you all know we are social animals. What makes us kind of unique on the world is that we thrive on socialization. We actually survive because we're
Yes.
social animals and helping each other. And of course, the COVID, the virus has just separated us. We now do these things like Zoom meetings, right? And we would normally have this meeting today probably in a nice part of the church, and we'd all be there. But again,
That's
because we're
true.
removed from others, I think that has really added to a malaise, I guess would be the best word, that just kind of permeates, as well as everything else that's going on in the world. That's tough enough, but COVID has added this extra dimension um, to our depression. Um, this idea of staying at home, being quarantined at home, is
Yes.
something that wears thin pretty quickly. I think we got through a little bit in March, okay, April, and then May we were probably outside of our skin because we couldn't even get close with family members in many cases.
Yes.
We couldn't even go for visits in many cases. Um, so anyway, that's an issue. Another part of depression that's been around for many years is alcohol and drug abuse. And I think COVID has added that as another dimension here, because as people get more depressed, get more angry, get bored, they turn to substances for relief.
Hmm.
And I think that has increased our depression. And of course, having a mental problem like bipolar disorder or post-traumatic stress or some anxiety disorder already before this COVID crisis, this just adds a fuel and booster to those ailments.
So true,
So
doctor. So
yeah,
true.
and I can also talk about work-related things, but that's my overview.
Yeah, that's so very true. Dr. White, concerning this quarantine and concerning being closed in close quarters, couples are seeing a new light on each other because they could not get away from each other. Whereas it was always so that they could go to work or go out to the gym or go for a walk or go shopping, somewhere to relieve the stress. So I've had to deal, even in my own area community, with couple counseling, and only because we are weary of quarantine and we're weary. Love you dearly, but I'm tired of you right now. Love you dearly, though. Could you give the couples a little bit of advice concerning that before we end up in
Sure.
divorce court?
Yeah, I mean, I think that couples have to adjust to the reality that you're describing, and and this is one where there's not that built-in established rhythm of leaving, having a reunion at the end of the day, and then spending some time together, and that's an ideal and certainly not always the case, in many families who experience, different shifts in terms of work, who, experience multiple stressors related to parenting, related to taking care of older relatives. I mean, this is a really hard time for families and particularly for couples. And then there's the kind of the existential aspect that you're bringing up, which is we're here together all the time. And at least, often that's the case. And
Yes.
so it really forces many couples to address issues that up to that point they may have successfully avoided.
Okay.
And avoidance actually works from a kind of an outcomes perspective as long as both partners are signed up for that.
Yes.
You can argue that it's not necessarily healthy, but couples do okay when they both sign up for avoidance. But when you can't avoid, when you can't do the things that you've normally done to, kick the can down the road, as it were, then, the conflict comes up and kind of hits you in the face. And I think that's what's happening with lots of couples these days.
Okay.
They are faced with a level of conflict that they've not developed the skills to manage.
Okay. With the term new norm is being thrown around, and I have such exceptions to that because in my defining norm is something that is familiar. And so do you guys really think that we're in a new norm, or are we just in a different age altogether or stage of life? Any doctor?
I can speak a little to that. I think that if we think about norms, the way we think about it in sociology, it's just things that are common and that we've become used to. So in some ways, I think working from home more is going to become more of the norm for people who have higher education, right? So there's some real race and class differences that we're seeing here, right? But for people who have bachelor's degrees and who can work from home, that's going to happen more, right? So companies can save money in some ways when people are not in the office, right? So I think that part will become sort of the new norm. But I just want to mention one thing related to families too, if that's okay.
Sure.
If we think about women in particular right now, women who tend to take on the burden of childcare responsibilities, especially those who are working outside of the home, it's particularly difficult for women right at this point, right? And we've been reading articles about women who have taken leave of absence from their jobs, gone part-time, stopped working altogether. And I think that shift might also add to friction in relationships that Dr. White mentioned as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. But really, when you think of norms, don't you think of things that you're already sort of in touch with? And so to me, this wouldn't, Dr. Hollingsworth, wouldn't this be more like a new era, a new time, a new life? I mean, because so many things that we know are gone.
Yeah, and I think that, with norms develop over time.
I agree.
Right. So over now it's still relatively new. Still working from home. But, we're seeing that people are making decisions already about next year already. So we're already looking like, months in advance. So I do think that, as Dr. Bevel said, that like working from home more often will probably be a new norm that we have to get used to. So I think that time will tell whether or not this is a norm or like a trend, and it'll go down and we can go back to life like we previously knew it as. But I think only time will tell. The process
of isolation making people that are, we're just crowd. Most people like the crowd. You like your selected crowd. Let me place it that way. We all like our own selected crowd, whatever that may curtail. But now with isolation, the difference between that, loneliness is one thing, but isolation is a forced issue. Would you all agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, so by it being a forced issue, are more people feeling as if they're being more controlled maybe than allowed to be free? Because we had a semblance of liberty because we thought I could get in my car, go to any restaurant I want, I could go buy whatever I want. That was a semblance of what we considered liberty. Now with this altered lifestyle of isolation, and it's a prison word that we've become familiar with. Prisoners are isolated because of bad behavior. How do you think that this is playing now on the concept of us mentally?
Well, I think really it's an era of transition. It's an altered state, of course, but I think it is a transition to a new normal. And it'll be not huge, it'll be in small ways. And then after a while, that will become our normal. The issue, I think, is the survival of the transition. Can we make it through this with saving ourselves, so to speak. And that's where it's so important. I think it's so important that people know how to reach out. I think that our mental health system is so flawed and has so many problems that it's just not going to be able to handle this in the typical mental health that services that we provide. So people are going to have to learn to reach out to their church, to their ministers, to other helping individuals beyond the traditional, mental health professional. So ministers, anyone that can just give some guidance, to people. It's that reaching out. I think school children are going to be affected greatly by this. In fact, we don't even know what the effects are. I just read in the newspaper yesterday that a lot of school systems are eliminating snow days. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love my snow days. I mean, I look forward to my snow days, but no more snow days. Yep, we're going to do Zoom days. So these kids, that's a whole, but they'll acclimate to that. That'll become the new normal. No more snow days, but they'll have Zoom days, and they'll get it. They'll do that. So there will be a transition. It'll be a new normal, and it'll come in thousands of little ways.
When I think of isolation, I think of what comes to mind is like depression. So one of the key symptoms of depression is isolation. So people who have depression, they tend to withdraw from their friends and family. They start to isolate from other people, excuse me. So I think that, as Dr. King said, like if you already have depression or anxiety, this isolation is only going to exacerbate those symptoms that you already have. And one of the best treatments we have for depression is called behavioral activation. And with that treatment, we essentially get people to get back to doing things that they enjoy doing, their hobbies that they used to enjoy doing, they don't quite do anymore because of the depression. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's kind of taken away that treatment some. So, usually I would tell people, go to the movies with your significant other, or go to the park, or go on a trip, these things that they enjoy doing. Right. But now we're limited in the amount that we were able to do now. So now we're like grasping at straws, trying to tell people like doing like Zoom meetings or Zoom sessions or FaceTime your family, these ways that we can still connect with people, to still get that benefit from being around other people in the best way that we can right now. So, when you mention isolation, I just think about depression and, how we're having to think of alternate ways for people to connect with other people now.
Okay. I so agree. Because we're routine. We are routine. Humans are routine creatures. We are so familiar with the routine, our special chair, our special coffee cup, can't have a good cup of coffee unless you give me my cup. So the routine has been smashed to smithereens, so to speak. In doing so, do you believe that people are finding within themselves a greater need for spirituality?
I think so. And I think it might take a number of different forms,
Yes.
right? So as you mentioned, the routine, right? So there's the social regulation, right? So rules that guide your world and your day. Like you said, you get up at this time, you go to work at this time, you pick up your kids at this time. Those things have all been altered, right? And we already talked about how we're not really able to integrate, as Dr. Hollingsworth said, with our social groups. Socially, right? So those routines are gone. So people are turning, I think, in some ways to spirituality, right? So this might be going to church online. So like I stream my Facebook with my pastors every Sunday, right? So that's one way. We've done seminars that people are able to log into during the week about a certain topic. But I think people are also finding other things to find comfort. So I think a big one is music.
Yes.
So listening to music on streaming platforms, I know has been really important for me and some of my friends through this time too. So creative ways to find relief and just relax for a bit. So it might be praying, it might be a Facebook church, it might be a prayer meeting, or it might be music. It might be all of them.
Yeah, and I think we're going to need all of them to make it through. This whole thing about socialization and the spirituality part. Do you think that people are more, I know from my experience in talking, that people are really starting to look inside of themselves. Are you all experiencing that? I'm really experiencing people looking inside of themselves and seeing, I am great and I can even be greater. I am wonderful and I can even be more wonderful. And so I'm like, well, what can we do to accomplish that? That they're beginning to look at themselves and seeing their ability as an individual. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think that is happening with individuals. They're somewhat stopped, arrested in their tracks, in their normal patterns, and so it often causes people to, ask different types of questions that sometimes have more, a different sort of depth than maybe what they normally process internally. And I think that also happens with couples. I think couples are, whether it's a result of the conflict that's now increased, couples more and more are kind of, asking questions of themselves and one another, about larger meaning and bigger issues, bigger questions in terms of importance, in terms of meaning. So I think you're seeing that not only kind of psychologically for individuals, but also relationally within couples and families.
And also, I was thinking that, Dr. Bevel, you sort of hit it when you said about the women, but I'd like to hit it on another aspect. We are seeing, I don't know about you guys, but we're seeing a lot of new entrepreneurs popping up everywhere. People are taking the simplistic things that they took for granted. Like today, I had one that's starting a new t-shirt business with these great, magnificent sayings. So the creativity, and I think that's just a God thing. I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, so I believe it's a God thing that all of this creativity is coming from everywhere. In the midst of this pandemic, all is not lost, I guess I would say. All is not lost. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I remember reading in the New York Times a few weeks ago about people, largely women, who have been like baking and making meals and started off making things in their building and then ended up going on social media and then delivering across town and getting these big backlog of orders. So I definitely agree. People are taking things that they love that maybe they didn't have time to do before, like Dr. White mentioned, and sort of honing those skills. And there's a market for that. They're getting support and they're able to grow their businesses. I think that's a silver lining to some of this.
I really do. I really do. Let's talk about our children, because that's a big issue right now. And we started off with that. Speaking about our children is totally huge. Before the pandemic, we had a great deal of youth that were mentally troubled. And without any resources, really. I think you hit it when you said that the medical field, a lot of them were not getting what they needed emotionally and mentally, as well as that the quota of youth that we have in services that don't even have a home but are staying with other people. I don't think that's something that we can ignore. What would you suggest, or where do you think we are with all of this with our youth now that this has come? Next week, I'm having a panel of about, 10 or 15 Gen Zs coming up to talk about where they're at. But as the adults in this, well, maybe, as the adults in this, because some things I don't feel so mature about, as the adults in this, where do you think our responsibility lies toward them?
I think we are role models. And just to build on your comment, Pastor, about looking inward certainly makes a huge amount of sense, but also looking outward for others, I think is key in this. Yeah. And we tend, particularly in New England, to walk around in little bubbles. And I think this pandemic is going to put a little pinprick in those bubbles, hopefully, and that people will reach out to others, either through the church or a ministry, And so we can be great models for teenagers, for example. We can encourage them to speak with their peers, which is who they speak with. And if we reach out, we can help not only our neighbor, but we can help be a model for teenagers.
Yes, doctor, because we start even in our sanctuary. Am I my brother's keeper? Will you answer that? You know, and right now we are our brother's keepers. The youth, I want to read the statistics here. Youth mental health is worsening. It says that from 2012 to 2017, the prevalence of past year major depressive episodes, MDE, increased from 8.66% to 13%. The ages were 12 to 17. Now over 2 million youth have MDE with severe impairment. Will you please explain, so that the parents, before they become frightened, exactly what is MDE? Any doctor?
So MDE is a major depressive episode. So a major depressive episode includes a number of symptoms. We're looking at, to be diagnosed with it, over a 2-week period of having a depression. So being really sad. So being sad is an emotion that we all experience. We're looking at depression is for like 2 weeks straight of being more sad than usual and more days than not. And there are symptoms including like the isolation, so isolating from your family and friends.
Okay.
We can see like weight changes, so gaining weight or losing weight. Sleep difficulty, so insomnia, so not being able to go to sleep, or waking up in the middle of the night, like waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and not being able to go back to sleep after that, or the opposite in hypersomnia. So that's when a person sleeps way more than usual. So like, they sleep in 15 hours a day. We can see symptoms including being fidgety, being restless. Also, suicide ideation is a symptom as well, so having thoughts of death or thoughts of harming themselves. So those are some of the symptoms of a major depressive episode.
Okay, if a parent sees these signs, definitely we're not qualified as well as you all, but what would be some of the things that you would suggest that parent should do for that young person?
Yeah, and I just want to say, for kids and teenagers, we can also see irritability as another symptom of depression, very common in kids. So they may not come off as sad, but maybe much more irritable than usual. But to answer your question, if a parent sees this, to ask them like, hey, how are you doing? Like, are you feeling more sad than usual? Is there anything that I can do? Then also, unfortunately, there's a huge stigma in mental health. So being comfortable going out and seeking a mental health provider, and like you say, seeing a professional who will be able to intervene before things get more severe.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in to help these parents?
I can say one thing, not from a perspective that's clinical like Dr. Hollingsworth, because I'm not a clinical practitioner, but thinking about how there are intersecting issues happening in the world, right? So parents of kids of color, for example, are dealing not only with the pandemic and isolation, but also racial tensions, racial unrest happening at the same time. So being able to talk to kids and students on their level about what's happening in the world, because they're hearing it anyway, through social media, through their friends. So talking to them about those issues, talking to them about racism, talking to them about what they can do if they see something that's wrong is also important too, because we can't act like that's not happening as well.
I love that. I love that, because I think a lot of parents get lost in what to say about all of this. And so I thank you, doctor, because that's very major, especially for the children of color. That's very major. Why is everyone angry? Why is everyone so angry at one another? Children are innocent. They don't know why. They don't know racism. They don't know all of those terms. All they know is everybody's mad. I'm tired of everybody being mad. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to stop and not avoid. What would you say to parents when they're fearful of even speaking in the house? I know some specifically. So much is going on. I don't want to make them more angry. I don't want to make them more upset. I don't want to frustrate them anymore. Now, that's not my personality, but there some people have the personalities like, let's not rock the boat. I'm a boat rocker, but let's not rock the boat. How would you help that person, even in their marriages and all, in relationships? They say, I don't want to rock the boat, but the boat may need to be rocked in a time like this so that we all can get through here successfully together. What would you suggest for that?
Sometimes it's as simple, I think, and this goes for adults as well as kids, is that we simply reach out to them. How you doing? What's going on? As a previous person said, that reaching out to them just shows a connection. Because I think we all get less connected in these kinds of times, and we help them, we help ourselves when we do that. The other practical thing is, if you have any control over the news that they watch, or social media that they see, you got to kind of figure out a way with them to limit their exposure to all of this negativity and sensationalism. I think that just messes with all of our minds.
Okay. But what about the person in rocking the boat, though? How does that boat rocker work? I'm looking for some explanation to that, for that person, some context, so that they would be able to say, I got an idea. This is what I can do. I heard it on the show. I'm going to try this, because they may not have the courage to rock. And with young people, you're not going to be able to, depending on the age, but most of them, you're not going to be able to really keep an eye on everything that they see, because most of them have their phones now, and most of them have their iPads, and most of them know how to work the system. They're technical. They know how to work the system better than most parents. Even my grandchildren take the phone and go, and I'm like, how did you get over there? I'm still trying to send a text. And they're like, no, my name is Seema with them. No, Seema, just hit that button. I'm like, what button? I never even knew I could get over there that quick. So parents really are sort of outdated when it comes to these little digital creatures we have. And they are amazing. How would you tell the parent who is sort of not versatile in all of this digital stuff? How would you talk with them? What would you say to them to encourage them?
I would say just have a conversation with your kids in a really in a low stakes way. So nothing flared up recently. Just have a conversation with them. Say, what did you know about this? What have you heard about this? What have your friends saying about this? What's your understanding of this particular thing that happened?
Okay.
So to hear what they say, ask them some other questions. Ask them if they maybe thought about it in a different way, or why might that be happening, and
Great.
sort of kind of have a dialogue with them. And also, I think other parents are struggling too, right? So I know I go to my good girlfriends and say, what are you saying to your daughter about this?
Mm-hmm.
So be kind of like a support for each other, because we're all trying to figure it out. But I think just keeping communication key, asking what they've heard, because they've heard something, and then just trying to probe a little bit deeper and giving them some other ways to think about whatever the thing is that's really bothering them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. At least our viewers can run with that, because it can be very challenging. In this isolation, people who don't normally drink as much are starting to drink, according to statistics. Marijuana is starting to be in high demand, greater than it's ever been. So people are finding ways to alter, to escape, because it's fearful. I mean, we can talk about the good things, but it's fearful for a lot of people. Those who have lost their jobs, those who are not educated or qualified, and their businesses, like if you're a waitress, you're down. You're down right now. If you're a bartender, you're down right now. And these are great occupations. How do we deal with all of that, especially those that are finding themselves going to substance other than finding substance within themselves? And that's such a major thing right now. not finding substance or not thinking that they have the strength. They have the strength to go on. What would you say to that situation?
Well, as you mentioned, with substance use disorders, we know that people typically who have a substance use disorder, use it to escape, right? Whether that's escape their depression, escape their trauma, escape their anxiety. There is a reason why. And once this is outside of, the typical, there are guidelines the CDC has. So specifically for alcohol, like, 1 drink a day for a woman, 2 drinks a day for men are considered moderate drinking. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about
Doctor?
more some of it. It's 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks a day for men.
Why do the guys get more to drink?
Body mass size.
Come on, guys. Come on. I mean, I don't deal with alcohol or anything, but come on. Why do you guys get more to drink?
Biology. So there are recommendations that the CDC has for what we call moderate drinking. So this is for, but the other end of the spectrum, right? So people have the substance use disorders. So one of the key things is talking about, if you get this release from substance use, what is another activity that you can do to still get that? Whether that's working out at the gym or exercising or meditation or deep breathing. So what are some alternative behaviors that you can do to still get that release and still get that escape other than substance abuse?
Okay, thank you. Because it's definitely one of the greatest issues right now. And I think people are becoming ashamed of themselves because people who never did it before are starting like, I got to get away from this. I got to get away from this. And not to leave anybody condemned or feeling bad about themselves, but to let you know you're not in a bubble by yourself. A lot of people are having the same feelings you're having. So our viewers, a lot of people are feeling this way. How can I escape? Just give me 10 minutes to me so that I can live and be wherever I want to live and be. So that's great. Thank you. Also, let's deal with the fact of self-esteem. Self-esteem. We're having a lot of people that, as I've said previously, they've lost their jobs. And I think Dr. Bevel, you said it also, where you said, the educational part and one of you said the educational part and all that, not qualified to go out, only certain people. This is becoming a big challenge now with a lot of people in self-esteem. The mother that sits home and has to take care of the children, the father that's not bringing in as much as he should, all of this, and the fact that they're going to cut down the unemployment from 600 to 300. How would you encourage that person that's dealing with it? And the fact that there are some people still, according to the report, that have not even received any unemployment. I think that's so crazy. I don't even know how that could happen. There are couples and all. There are people that are living who have not even received. So places like ours, where like the King's Pinch, we have 6 locations. We brought it into one because of the overload. People are just standing there. We open at 10. People are there at 7, 8, working and standing just to get some fresh food. How could we encourage or say something to them, those people, even the fact that they're going to have to re-educate themselves. So what society is calling for now, what the workforce really wants now. What would you say for their self-esteem? How could they work in building that up? Great minds are thinking.
I want to add a little bit to that, because if we look at our first responders, it's another kind of issue with them. And I work with a lot of police, and they're losing it. I mean, they're stressed out with the nature of their job and COVID and protection equipment and having it, and then difficult times of community relations work. And then the normal politics of their job. So this COVID crisis has made it particularly difficult on them. And it's really a shame, because the young people who are just entering that profession, they're like under 5 years on the job, they just are thinking, how the heck do I get out? Why did I ever do this? Yeah. And you
That's
have to
true.
really, you have to promote their their good qualities, their intelligence, and talk about that. Point out the positive, because when that positivity or sarcasm, not sarcasm, but they kind of become sarcastic about their jobs, they become more negative, more depressed.
Yes.
So you have to say, listen, this is another crisis. We've been through these before, and just positivity, positivity. And I think Dr. Hollingsworth would agree that positive psychology is one of the strongest movements in psychology today. And that's the way I look at it. And getting through the drinking is really getting through a healthy lifestyle. The way I look at it is drinking is fine, but you don't find alcohol in health food stores because it's not healthy.
Okay.
And
True
we got
that.
this, in a national campaign with smoking. We made a lot of changes in people's behavior. We pointed out all of the, and I think we need a huge public campaign. The only people that make money off of this COVID crisis, I think, is liquor stores. And that's been proven statistically. They
Wow.
have made tons of money, and they're just feeding this. I think that's like the cigarette thing. You can't do that.
Dealing with all of this, I want to go, and I'm probably Dr. Hollingsworth, into your area of suicide. I'm going to be very careful how I say this. I've noted more suicides now in the arena for me to have the service people than I have had in my whole years of pastoring. And our congregation is a little sizable, but in our whole year of pastoring, more suicides, more thoughts of suicide, like you had said earlier. And it is also heavy in the people of color, more than has ever been before. And I'm almost, because years ago, when you say, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself," for people of color, your mother would say to your child, "You don't get out of my face talking like a fool," and swat you away. But now when someone says that, you're like, "Can we talk? Can we just maybe need a time to talk? Can we just talk a little bit about that? Because that's nothing to play with anymore." At one time it was, because you only said it for fun. People are not saying it for fun anymore. They're saying it because they mean it. And that's what led me from there, from the drug abuse into this, because people are taking a drug that will take their life. A lot of different things are happening. How would you address that, Dr. Hollingsworth?
Yeah, like as you noted, we definitely are seeing an increase in suicides among the African American community. So historically, African Americans have had lower rates of suicide compared to other ethnic groups, and we still see that today, but the rate itself is still increasing. In fact, it's one of the leading causes of death in African American young adults is suicide. And I don't think that most people know that. So there's definitely
You said it's
something
the
that is
leading.
severe.
You said
It's one of the. It's not the top, but it's one of the leading.
you
I believe
educated
it's
me.
the third leading cause
Okay.
of death in African American young adults. Definitely in the top 5. So definitely it's a concern, for African Americans, young adults, and we see that compared to the white population, African Americans tend to die by suicide at a younger age.
That's
So
true.
it looks like your older African Americans, that's when the rate starts to decrease. And I'm sorry, I forgot the end part of your question.
The part. What should we be doing about
Oh,
that?
thank you. So, of course, as with mental health stigma, there's also suicide stigma as well. So people are afraid to ask, like, hey, like, have things been down if you thought about harming yourself? So I think one thing is just get comfortable asking that question, and then also being familiar with the resources as well. So there is the National Suicide Hotline number, which is 1-800-273-8255. So it's
Would you
open
give that number
24/7.
again so the technical people can grab it?
Yeah, so it's 1-800-273-8255, and that's the National Crisis Line. And that can be for any type of crisis. You don't have to be having thoughts of suicide. You could just be going through a really hard time. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You need somebody to talk to. They're also a resource as well. So I think that being more comfortable talking about suicide and decreasing some of that stigma will help out with decreasing the suicide rate.
Thank you. It's almost our time to go. Let's talk real quickly. Could you help the viewers with how to keep focus in all of this? How do you keep your focus in all of this? Could you just, all of you, can you just give us a little hint so that they will know?
You know, I think it's important to just develop a plan that doesn't try to do too much, and to kind of regulate, you know, how much energy and how much effort. You know, a lot of times when people are trying to make a change and improve their lives, they try to do too much, and it actually ends up backfiring on them. So I've always been attracted to this adage that I heard years ago that, you know, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we tend to underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. And you could probably, you know, adjust that to various other units of time, but basically we try to do too much too early, as opposed to developing a plan that kind of builds more gradually. So just in general, in terms of, you know, how to maybe be more hopeful and be more successful in making changes, you know, I think setting realistic goals and making a plan where those can be laid upon one another is really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I could add to that. I think it's very helpful for people to think about the 3 Ps, I call them. And it goes in with the plans too, but it's a higher way of looking, I guess. One is productivity and stability financially. And that could be a part-time job or anything where there is some income. I mean, we're not happy people if we don't have financial stability. Number 2 is passion. We have to have passion for something. It doesn't have to be any grandiose hobby or whatever, but we are working animals also. Okay, so when we are doing something, we're happier, and we have to believe in something. And the church fits so well into this. But anything that we can be passionate about. And the last P is positivity. I think I talked to you about this before. So positivity is that cornerstone there of just having a good outlook, look for the good stuff, you know, look for what we can achieve, don't look at what we can't achieve. So productivity, stability, passion, and a sense of positivity are my three tips.
Thank you. It's great. Great. Doctors?
This is all good advice. I'm taking notes, by the way. This is good stuff. I would say just take some time, and it could be a small amount of time. You know, we're all really busy. Maybe it's 15 minutes. Something you love doing, just do it. And it could be something really small. It could be coloring, it could be drawing. It could be just writing in your journal, reading, dancing, watching something funny on television. Just whatever you like. It could be a small amount of time every day. Just try to find time to do that. And then try to focus on the positive, like Dr. Keene said.
I'm pretty much, summarizing what everybody else said. I've been telling people to try and stay as active as possible. Given the current situations and things being limited, if you used to like working out at the gym, but you don't feel comfortable going to the gym anymore, can you buy some weights and work out at home or do some push-ups at home? We can't go see our grandparents, we can't go see our family members. Give them a call, give them a FaceTime. It doesn't have to be like a whole hour-long conversation, but just connecting with somebody for a brief period of time. And although it'll feel good for you, you may also be like the highlight of that person's day, right? They may be just sitting at home all day, wanting to talk to somebody, and you called them and that made their day. So just trying to stay connected to people as much as possible until we're able to get back to life as like we previously knew it.
Thank you guys so much. We just had a question come in that has repeated itself. What are the symptoms in someone who doesn't verbally express suicidal thoughts?
Good question. So there are some signs, and once again, you have to take it in context as well. So some other things can be like going back to the behavior. So once again, they're isolating themselves a lot more than usual, right? And they used to like going out a lot, but now they just stay at home a lot. Also, another kind of warning sign are giving away valuables. That's another kind of sign that they may have decided that they are thinking about attempting suicide, so they're giving away valuable items. Those are the two signs that come off the top of my head immediately. I'm not sure if anybody else would have any of those other type of behavioral like signs that somebody's thinking about suicide.
Doctor, haven't you also noticed that sometimes when a person's mind is made up to do something, they have this euphoria of fake happiness and life is good and I love you and you love me. So they go from one deep depression until the next day they're like, hi, how are you? What's going on?
Yeah, I have read that as well, that once they've decided they are going to attempt suicide, and you're right, they're in this depression episode, and now they've decided, they get this kind of random happiness that they've decided.
Yes.
I have personally not seen that in my practice, but I have read that is a thing that could happen though.
Yes, they really, really do. And they become talking where they were never vocal before. They become very, very vocal. Mm-hmm. So we trust that we've helped you, viewer, with a couple of the signs. Well, doctors, I want to thank you for your time. It has been so nice. Thank you so much for spending this lunchtime conversation with us. And we trust that our viewers have enjoyed. Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you, Dr. Hollingsworth. Thank you, Dr. Bevel, so much. All right. Have a great day. Have a great day. To our viewers, we want to thank you so much for sharing this time with us. It has been another conversation experience. We trust that you've been benefited, and we want to also please remember the King's Pantry, and please remember the support that it needs right now. The numbers are increasing so rapidly. Think about us when you think about giving. Think about the King's Pantry. Won't you please? Well, it's been great. Have a wonderful afternoon and make your day smile back at you. God bless you.